Our speaker is Christine Thomas. Christine is the proud owner and co-founder of CK Digital Learning Solutions, learning and development consulting agency specializing in helping businesses invest in their people through modernized training. She provides expertise in instructional design, change management, leadership training, and remote onboarding support. Christine and her partner Kathy have been tremendous supporters of TLDC and have spoken a number of times over the last few years. So Christine, thank you for once again coming in and sharing your knowledge with the community. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over with Is Content the Cure? How to follow the data versus the request for new training. I'll go ahead and just hide myself from the screen.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And so appreciate your patience. Really happy to be here this morning. And I was excited about this particular conference. It's interesting with as much information that is flowing out there these days. I thought, man, what a great idea to have a conference on how to harness the data that's available. And not only that, what do you do with it and how to use it and how to just go above, that traditional request. So question for everybody in chat, thumbs up, because I didn't have a chance to set the poll. Sorry, the technology was a little different, but I always like to kind of find out. So how many of you will do thumbs up for actually work with or within a department in a W-2 format? And maybe hearts for those of you that are contractors and are currently working like the 1099 role. I like to kind of see how everybody's position is so I can make sure I hit each perspective. Thumbs up. So a new lots of thumbs up. Okay, perfect. Cool. So I think this is going to be something that kind of applies to everything. And W-2 is in-house. That's right, Raymond. So if you work for an organization and you're considered an actual employee, that would be a W-2. And a 1099 is somebody who's going to be a contractor. They kind of bring them in. I think the new phrase is fractional contracting, fractional services. So I think you'll find this interesting for all of you. It should be a fun topic, but how many, have you all kind of gone through and heard any of the following statements? We need new training to fix this. These new hires and these new employees just aren't prepared when they leave training. How do they not know our systems, or even better, love this one, our performance numbers are too low right now. What's missing in training? So today we're going to spend some time just kind of talking about, what is training about? How can we work together? As Lewis mentioned, I am Christine Thomas, been in remote work environment for over 20 years now and working in the corporate field and industry with training in L&D for close to 18 years now. In my 50s, embracing it, loving it, and really enjoying it, but kind of circling back. Do we need more training? Or better training? Do we really? So today we're going to kind of talk through, is that the question that we need to ask before we get started? Because a lot of times folks in training are considered to kind of just be order takers. And I hate that about the L&D department and that assumption. So today we're going to talk about why training isn't always the answer and how we can use data to guide making better decisions and the right decisions to support the true problems and challenges in business. So the assumption that training can solve all of the problems a lot of times leads to wasted resources. So using data from your human resources department, your operations team can really help determine what the actual issue is instead of allowing the business to make that assumption that content's always the cure, because we know no matter how many times we have to create a new training or, evaluate what our department is doing wrong, maybe we're not the problem. So today we're going to talk about how to empower you to partner with other departments, the right questions to ask, and really just kind of dig in to find out if in fact content is the cure. So the first place to start is always at the beginning. For me, before we think about whether training is the solution, we kind of need to take a more holistic look at the journey of an employee. And that always starts with the hiring process. How many of you all have ever been asked to review a job profile or provide input on the requirements for a role before they even start the hiring process and setting up interviews to determine who in fact will be sitting in your training classes? Anybody get a chance to do that? Or does that just happen and magically you hear, hey, we're starting a new hire training, here's your roster, these are the people that are going to be attending, right? A lot of times that's how things go. We're kind of that middle part of the road in the journey where someone is deciding who should be there, and then someone else is going to manage that person. But in fact, everybody kind of, I want to say points the finger, but kind of comes back to how come they're not better prepared? So this is going to give you a little bit of insight into how to put you in a better place and kind of have some say on who's coming into the class. So before, again, we want to kind of do a better job on insisting on a seat at the table, which means being included in the journey from the beginning. So to do this, everybody in training can kind of help do a little bit of the following. So we've got two things that we can focus on. Understanding the role, super important. And this can apply to whatever positions you're trying to prepare. So it could be customer service reps, it could be tech support, it could be, any of the things that take time to learn the roles, use tools and systems. Those things are, kind of required across the board. So understanding what you're looking at, a lot of times companies will have pre-assessments in place. Some do typing tests, some do voiceovers to understand clarity. So understanding what they're looking at and what the human resources department is doing to find the right fit is super important. Asking for that information isn't too hard. I always go with worst case scenario, they can tell me no. But why are you gatekeeping? Why are you not letting me see who we're hiring and what that profile looks like? A lot of times what you'll find is the outdated hiring profiles that the HR team is working with in the actual job that they're looking to fill may have a different level of skills that are needed. Not for nothing, but technology is flying right now. So if there isn't someone to address, we need a higher level of understanding on technology that hasn't been incorporated into that profile. What does that mean for training? Can you relate? I can immediately think back. You get that new group of people and they're like, man, I don't know how to put an attachment in my email. How do I check my browser? All of these things. And as a trainer, I can remember sitting there thinking, how did you get here? How did you get here? So a lot of that could just come from mismatching job expectations and the actual skills that candidates have. So to be fair, it's not HR's fault either. Nobody's let them know that, hey, you know what? We've kind of increased and improved our technology and software so that level of skill has kind of increased. So what they have been normally hiring for and searching for just isn't simply a good match. There's so many assumptions. You're right, Elizabeth. So many assumptions during the hiring process that if we just sat down and asked a couple of questions, we could just kind of bring some light to it, the situation. So you're absolutely correct. And we as trainers find all these things out kind of like before day one of true content even begins, right? So the more we rely on this digital industry that we're in and digital learning, people aren't coming in to pick up their equipment. Equipment's getting shipped out. We're a remote workforce, which we love. But if you're getting people that don't understand that technology component on setting it up, it's a challenge. So that's been a big challenge. And Ray, you're right. It started to happen with COVID where everybody immediately had to shift to that remote workforce. You know, the technology skills weren't always there. So collaboration is going to be the second component to working with your human resources team. And you want to partner and work with them and make sure that the job description that they're putting out there actually aligns with the job that the operations or that managing team is expecting. And we can be that partner in the middle because we're the ones responsible to each side. So it's kind of like that triangle. And, you know, they look, HR is like, hey, here's who you get. We get them, have to work with what we have. And operations is like, how come they aren't as prepared as they should be? So if we just own the responsibility of being that department in the middle, we can work with those both sides to bring them to the table. So there's a couple of ways to do that. And some of those action items are work on revamping the profile, be included and talk to somebody, bring operations in, and the three groups sit down and discuss. Is this still real? Is this still what we're looking for? Go through the tech requirements, go through the, you know, the personal soft skills. You know, maybe because technology is so new, it could be new for the customers as well. So that level of empathy, active listening skills, those may have also increased. But if we don't know, you know how it is in timing when it comes to training and they want them done faster, out on the floor quicker, some things are going to get cut. A lot of times it's soft skills. So it all integrates together. And so if we can collaborate and participate with human resources in that hiring process, that's one of the things that can really change who they're targeting to bring in to fill those roles. Quick story. In my previous life, partnered and worked at an organization. And I remember asking our HR person, we became pretty close in kind of going through this process. And I'm like, can I sit in and listen on the interviews and see like what are you asking and what they're saying? So that, first of all, she was like, what do you mean? You want to sit in on interviews? Are you sure you have time? And I made time. And the reason was because it was really eye-opening to see the lack of skills that were coming in and the assumptions that were being made about folks that were being interviewed. And it was really eye-opening to me to say, you know what? I know we can't change the whole upfront process, but in training, maybe we have a pre-day one where we do strictly technology and we get them ready to go into class and be more prepared. Doesn't have to be for everybody, but we could certainly identify through the hiring process that we had a group that maybe we needed to kind of give them, here's your browser, let's make sure everything's connected, your camera's working, test your mic, right? Just like we did today. You're going to have technical issues. Now, for everybody who's pretty proficient, why waste their time on day one? We ended up putting a solution in place to have a pre-day one tech-only support day where we had folks from the tech department team, the HR department team, and trainers came in and really went through the process of getting them prepared, making sure they could access their systems to find their content that they needed for day one, and just kind of settle those nerves of being new, not being prepared, and sometimes freaking out How many of you guys have had people where they don't even show up on the first day because they just get too scared? It's too much. Things didn't work out. They couldn't get things set up. And they said, you know what? This is going to be too much. So we found a way to kind of eliminate that. So I think a great question to ask is, are we setting employees up for success from day one? This is a great way to go through and do that. Another way, especially when it comes to data that human resources has that you should ask for, is what do the exit interviews say? And those people who do leave, was it anything about the lack of support when it came to technology? Did training move too fast? Did they feel that they were not prepared for the actual job that they were required to do? It's super insightful because, people on their way out, nothing to lose. They will burn the place down giving you back information in exit interviews. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to HR and I'm like, hey, I really kind of want to see that last batch over the last 3 or 4 months of folks that just haven't made it. And it's so insightful because they will tell you, yeah, we didn't spend nearly enough time on tools and navigation. I know how to talk to people. I know what I'm doing. I couldn't figure out the tools. So again, that's more information for me and data that I would have never had if I didn't ask for something, because I know I've kind of thought about it in the past. What happens to those exit interviews? I gave my feedback. What do they do with them? Sometimes it's just to check the box for an organization to say, yes, we conducted an exit interview. I know as a leader, definitively without asking for it, no one ever shared anything from an exit interview with me. So what are you doing with that data as a company? So don't be afraid to go ask and say, is it out there? Can I have it? Can I look at it? I think that's a really important component as well. So let's flip to the other side, right? So we've kind of talked about human resources and the start of the journey. What happens after they leave your classroom? So I think part of what we want to do here is how often, ask the questions again, how often as a training team do you meet with the operations team to check in? How did they do after they went through and completed training? There's so much information and data to help you evaluate the effectiveness of your training based on performance data. The trick is getting somebody to share it with you. They have tons of data. They have to report out. What is our customer satisfaction survey? If you're in a business where you're supporting tech support, how many times did your resolution successfully check the box for the customer? Some even track callbacks. Those are all super important. So the data's out there. Most of the time, requesting the information from the operations team is as simple as finding out who holds that key. Who's the person who has all that information? I kind of remember one time stumbling into, hey, we have this new system. We're going to start tracking data like 30, 60, 90 days. And I thought, I'd kind of like to see that, what happens, because I also feel there's an accountability component. When they've been out of training that 30 days out, you can't come back and tell me it was something I did or we did as a training department. Let me look and see, how did they do it 60 days and 90 days? So a lot of times as a whole, you just want to kind of take a look and see. So company performance and metrics are really important. I also am a firm believer in looking beyond training. So there's things that can really help you. If you analyze the process and kind of confirm that they're aligned with the current training, also really important. And looking at post-training feedback. So how many of you all in training send out that, how was training for you? That survey to new hires after they're done, Did you enjoy the training? Would you recommend that Kirkpatrick first level? Just tell me how you're doing. How does it feel? Those are important surveys to evaluate and look at. So again, that data is kind of built in. It's just getting your hands on it and really looking at it. So a lot of times, when we look beyond training, performance issues kind of go back to unclear processes, lack of resources, systems that don't work the way we were kind of advised that they did. So, for an example, if an employee isn't really following a procedure, is it because they weren't trained or because the system was too complicated? That's the kind of information that we can gather from talking to employees. Do the investigation on tools and systems and make sure. I know, I know even as a trainer back in the day, if I had an activity and it was kind of complicated, I'd be like, ugh, that one's really hard. Maybe I'll just kind of wing it and do my own thing. Would I have gotten the same results if I followed the process that was set up for me by the instructional designers? Probably, but it was too hard. So they operate just like we do. If it's too hard, they're going to find a workaround because they're going to want to try and work faster and make their lives easier. So I would certainly look into what's happening beyond training after they actually get out there into their roles. I thought it would be important to kind of talk through some of the helpful data to collect. So, depending on your business, is going to depend on what kind of data they collect. It can be customer satisfaction surveys if that's something that they track. If there are tech support items that they track, it could be tech resolution, callbacks. All of those are metrics that, again, you can get your hands on and kind of go through and digest. Where are they struggling and what are the challenges that they're seeing? Employee feedback, nothing better than walking the floor. Loved to get out of the classroom and go out and walk the floor and ask and talk to them. How are you guys doing? What's changed? What's working? What's not working? And then seeing that performance from the operations side, again, they're gathering it because they have to track how their employees are doing. And traditionally, it's at that 30, 60, 90-day performance period and those post-training evaluations. Those surveys would go out. I remember joining an organization and kind of starting to ask, like, hey, where are your surveys that you send throughout class? We don't send out surveys to see how we're doing. What do you mean? How are you supposed to know? Where are your post training? Like, how did we do? Do you feel prepared? No, we don't do those. So if you don't see or don't have access to that kind of data, take the initiative. Super simple. You can do as easy as a Google form at this point and put it out there to gather that data and really help yourself see if what you're doing is working, because now they're out there, they're in the real world, and they're going to have to apply the things that they've learned. And if not, learn on the job the things that we didn't have the opportunity to expose them to during training directly. My favorite part, leave the classroom, get out of the classroom, go sit in on operations calls, talk to team leaders, find out firsthand what's happening, what's going on, what are the challenges you're struggling with. I mean, as much as I would like to believe that if they went through training and everything was set up, they'd be 10 out of 10 ready and they hit the ground running and there's no ramp to proficiency. That's usually not how it happens. So the only way to find out what's working is to get out of the classroom. I used to, not that I would get in trouble, but they would be like, oh, here she comes again. She's, walking the floor. She's talking to, to team leads. She's sitting next to employees. I loved sitting and doing side by sides with employees and being like, what are you doing today? What's happening? What's your workday look like? What are you struggling with? And just really understanding and kind of listening to what they're doing versus what I expected they'd be fully prepared finishing the training that we had designed, right? So leaving the classroom is a great way to just kind of get out there and see kind of what's happening in the real world, because we are in that little bubble. What happens in the classroom, we do our thing, and then they're like our little kids. We just pass them off into the world and we hope they do well. But hope isn't a good strategy. So follow them out into their jobs, sit next to them, check in with them, see how they're doing, talk to their managers, find out. And again, there's absolutely data that you can find to support these things, but I'm a huge proponent of get out there, put your hands in it, see what's happening, for sure. So I think this next part is also super important. And this is where you can change your value within the business. If you insist on data-driven decisions, it makes things so much different in your organization for you and the people that you partner with. So I make it a habit when I work with clients, or if you work in a business, somebody comes to you and they say, hey, we need some new training. They're really struggling. I've got a team and they're really struggling with how to, complete a certain process. I always ask why, usually 3 or 4 times. Well, what's happening? What's going on? Why are you thinking that? One, it's a great way to understand where the ask is coming from. And if it's something that they really need, or is it just a decision because they don't know what else could potentially be broken or what else could potentially fix it. So there's a couple different ways that you can use data to drive the decisions to help your training department. One, efficiency and impact. I don't know about you guys, but that whole, hey, we need a training and we need it now on this system because, they're not performing. Now I have to find trainers, build something, put them together, get people together. And I can't even be sure that that's actually going to solve the specific need that they're looking for. I'm just listening and accepting what I'm being told. So now I don't know if my impact has made a difference or if there was an impact. And certainly you've kind of thrown a little wrench in our schedule. I have training classes and now we have to do this refresher on top of it. Pushing back on that helps you build credibility, using data and saying, show me where they're struggling. Is it at 60 days? Is it at 30 days? Is it smack out of class? Where are they struggling? And break it down into even the kind of challenges they're having so that you can see, is it a technical issue? Again, it changes and shifts you into being a strategic part of the team and a strategic leader versus just, they said they need training. Okay, let's make it happen, and being that order taker. So I think this is a valuable opportunity to increase your value in the business. The other part is it takes one time, which it seems like, it would be, you'd have to do it more than one time, but it takes one impactful time to create an example and use it as that opportunity for success. So for instance, we had a company that we were working for at the time, and we were able to kind of go through, they indulged me, and we went through the why and the show me and looking at the data. And, the struggle was the client wasn't really happy with the customer satisfaction survey results. And, so immediately the operations team came to me and they were like, we need new training. Soft skills are terrible. They're being super short with people on the phone. The frustration level's high. Our customer satisfaction rate is low. So, of course, why not make new training for it? That will fix it, right? So I said, well, let's talk about it. So we started looking into the data, and what I was able to see was they did great within those, those first couple of weeks after training. But then it was interesting because their metrics started to decrease the longer they were away from training. So I started asking, what do your teams look like? Let's see what happens at that point. And what we discovered was the team leader to employee ratio just had gotten bigger and bigger. So they had made a couple promotions, team leads had kind of moved into different positions, which meant the existing remaining team leads had to absorb more employees. So they went from a ratio of maybe 1 to 20 to 1 to 45. Now, if you're responsible for 45 people, what are the chances that you're going to take the time to sit down and spend with somebody brand new? And then again, you think, well, they've been here 30 days. They should get it. I don't need to spend time with them. Let me shift back and help these new folks. And so ultimately, what the team decided really wasn't training after all. They needed to reallocate and add more support resources in the operations side under team leaders. They'd been super excited. Everybody got promoted, not realizing if you don't put someone else in that position, you've spread your team too thin. So this was a big win. It was definitely not a blame game kind of situation. It was kind of an aha moment. And they were like, we kind of knew, obviously, we have less people to help a bigger group. But by me calling out from a training perspective, it gave them that validation, like, we get it. Okay, so now let's level up and get some of these folks that are doing really well prepared to be team leads, and all of the metrics balanced out. So again, it's kind of, what is the data telling you? And everybody had access to the same data I did. They just weren't looking at it from the lens of what can I do? They looked and immediately went, they're not performing well. Clearly the training didn't stick. So again, I think a good mantra to keep with your team is to just always ask, what's the data saying? So let's talk about an action plan for you in L&D. What can you do? What's something that you can do? The most important thing is to be organized and structured. So developing a needs analysis framework became something that was an acceptable practice in my last organization. They realized you're not just going to come and say, hey, we need training. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to dig in and understand from the data, the people coming in from HR, how they're performing in operations, and employee feedback through training on a consistent basis. So we kind of had a little bit of a footprint through their journey to determine where we needed to address a gap. And so it stopped that order taking mentality, which was super beneficial for everybody. The operations team stopped getting frustrated. Human resources finally felt like they had someone in their corner helping them, because again, they're like, what kind of people are you putting in here? How are we dealing with this? And, not seeing any change. So bringing and partnering everyone together with the other departments is the second plan of action. Start holding regular accountability calls. That was one of the things where we were able to kind of spot where we were struggling on either side of the business, and then the opportunities for training to address things that we didn't know had changed. So maybe the level and the profile had changed a little bit, and we weren't aware. Operations brought to the table, oh yeah, we were having problems with that particular process when it came to entering orders. So we had to kind of find a new workaround. Super important for us to know, since we're training, how to use the process the old way. So again, partnering with those departments and having a more holistic view of what the experience looks like for an employee, game changing for everybody involved. And it allowed us to build really good relationships together. So I would work much closer with the human resources department. We would kind of collaborate, and then ultimately started working with operations as well, and started to see a significant impact on what that looked like, not from our end and the results we were getting for the employee, but from the employee's perspective, so that when they did look at our organization, they could say, man, they hit on all three cylinders. My hiring process was very positive. I felt prepared for class. Training was on point. I was supported when I got out and went into the, real world and had to start doing my job. So by partnering, it was a positive effect for us, but more importantly, it was also a positive impact to the employees themselves. And then again, test stuff out. Don't be afraid to be like, you know what, let's try something new. Doing things differently is the only way you're going to see things change. So for instance, when we were kind of back in the COVID phase, you had folks that were excellent candidates, but they didn't have the technological skills they needed to set everything up on their own. We started having staggered tech sessions. Come in for 30 minutes. We have a tech guy here. He's going to walk you through it. We'll get you all set up. So by the time they came to training, they were ready. They were settled down. They could get to their material. It was a win-win. So don't be afraid to go and try new things. It makes it easier to get buy-in on new ways and kind of show yourself as a leader. But don't be afraid to throw ideas out there and then see how you do. You're not going to hit a home run every time. We certainly tried some things that weren't so successful. But again, if you're not trying and you're just doing the same thing, I feel like that's the definition of crazy, right? You just keep doing the same thing and expect different results. So we want to try and stay away from that as well. Yeah, so Raymond says nothing more frustrating than employees to be trained on something they can't apply with local factors that require the workaround. Yeah, I have a funny story to tell you about that one for sure. But we'll do a quick little recap. So the reality is there is no magic wand that's going to magically make training perfect for every person that came through. But by following the data, you can definitely make sure that you're solving for the right problem and you're coming up with the right solution. And again, content may not always be the cure. Collaboration is a big deal when you're starting to incorporate working with the human resources side and the operations. It kind of eliminates the finger pointing. Do you guys have that sometimes where there's a challenge and you're like, well, I did the best with what I could based on what HR sent me. And then you hear from operations, well, if they would have been better trained, we wouldn't be having low performance numbers. So it kind of takes all of that out of the way when you all start working together and you all have to be accountable. And I'm a huge data nerd. So data first. Always use the data as a guide before you jump into that mode of, okay, I get it. We definitely need to, to do some new training. So I think that's really important. So I thought I would kind of wrap and leave you with a couple of practical tips. We kind of talked about using exit interviews and performance reviews as data sources to spot, what's happening on the hiring side of things. I know they do performance reviews as soon as they come around every year. I know everybody cringes, right? Me personally, I never knew what happened to that information. Like, time for the annual review. no idea what this is going to help me with after I finish going through this. And that was on both sides, having to sit through them and then having to facilitate them as a business leader. What are you doing with that information? Somebody should open it up. Don't let them gatekeep that information on you, because that's where you can find out how people feel about how they're performing and how you can use that to your advantage to improve training and the relationship with both sides. I love this one on creating a checklist to rule out non-training issues before you come to me. That one was a little tough to get as an acceptable part of the business process, but if you stay firm and you stay true and you make sure that they ask those questions before they come to training, it really helps dial back on one, having to constantly be the person to either say no and or ask why. So we came up with, hey, if you guys can go through and check the box like, yes, our ratios are right for employees to support team. Yes, our processes are the same. Nothing has changed in the last 30 days. Those are the kinds of things that will help them in operations say, oh, you know what? I take it back. We have had a change in process. These folks that, went through training in the last 60 or 90 days would have no idea, right? So just having that checklist in place helps eliminate the problems that potentially can come from being like, just make a training. We'll have them go through it. That's not always the answer. And then start small. When you do a test or you run a pilot or you want to try something new or you want to get your business to take a different approach, start little. Find a fan in operations that will really help spearhead, like, let's do something different. Let's give Christine's way a try and see how it works. So when you can find somebody to buy in and spread that message, it makes it easier to get it circulated through leadership, which was super important. And then to stop guessing and start diagnosing. Again, there's so much information out there. You have to not be afraid to go ask. Sometimes you got to spend a couple hours digging through, learning a new system on where the data is stored and how to do it. Again, I'm all about finding a friend who loves data as much as me and is willing to kind of teach me and or build reports for me that will show me what I'm looking for. You'd be surprised. Those guys in data and analytics, sometimes they love to share their toys. They love to show you what they can do. And I'm like, this is amazing. Can you make a report for me? Absolutely. So, just start doing the diagnosis and get out there. I think that that's one of the easiest ways to kind of move the needle. And I'll leave you guys with a funny story. We had a client and they were in the tech support business. So immediately the level and skill set was pretty high with tools, navigation. They were for a telecom company. So they're taking customer complaints and tech issues that they were having, trying to use their knowledge base to solve, and then ultimately having to put in support tickets that a tech would roll out and go, help them on site. And so I started thinking about it and I was like, wow, we're really struggling in this one particular piece. And I thought, you know what? And I asked them, like, can I go hang out with a technician for a day? And they were like, what are you talking about? So I did a ride along and I rode with the technician to see, what does your day look like? Because you're the receiver of the information and you have to go deal with the actual customer. And come to find out, by the end of the day, there was a notes section that we had taught them in class that, the people taking the calls, notes to give to the technician when they get on site. Well, the technician was going into a completely different area where they had notes and had no idea that there were notes available from the people who were taking the calls from the customer. So the lack of communication, and it existed for both sides, they just didn't know that they weren't using the right process to get to each other's information. So I was able to take that information. One, the texts were like, this is the best thing ever. Someone's finally listening to us about our frustrations on why we're not knowing what we're walking into. And we were able to go back and make a simple modification to training to let them know, hey guys, if it's a note for just the general customer notes, it goes here. If it's a note for the technician, this is where you're going to put it. And poof, we really started to see a difference in resolution. They were able to resolve the customer's issues much faster. And it was a really low lift for us. It was just a simple discovery and easy fix just by kind of getting out of the classroom, looking at the data, and thinking outside the box and not just being an order taker. So yeah, that's my little fun story to end with. So I know we have a couple minutes left. Any questions that you guys have for me, or any feedback, anything I can do to wrap up for you today?
Hey, Christine, there was one here from AP in chat. How could the process, data types, or steps for requests for internal training needs for already working employees / teams and not just new hires be different, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of times companies will change the way they do things because, one, system limitations and or challenges, technical issues come up, things break, links break, your knowledge base may not be up to date, right? So the tenured or existing employees already have that tribal knowledge from working there. New folks come in, they don't know that that's broken. Nobody told training the link to that knowledge base article doesn't work, or whatever it may be. So that's how processes and steps can change without you knowing for the new hire. My recommendation as a training leader, it's your responsibility to stay engaged with the operations team to talk about what's new, what's happening, how are things doing. These are the things that we're covering in class. Are we on the right track? So having them review, yes, these are the same processes, or, oh, you know what, we switched that. That wasn't really effective anymore. This is what we're doing. Now, all of a sudden, I get the opportunity to go in and prepare a new hire better because they've shared the information with their people on the floor, right? They already know. I have to let them know. If you don't ask from the training perspective, they have enough going on. They're not going to come back and be like, hey, we think this is important for you to know. So you have to be proactive in going out and validating your new hire training.
Nice. It seems like your approach is very balanced. It's, there's, because you have a lot of interaction, like sort of people-centered solutions, but then you're also relying on the data to guide you. Is there a way that you can measure whether or not you're off kilter, like if you become sort of like unbalanced at all in your approach?
Yeah, I think the data will tell you, right? So, and the relationships, when you start to have those conversations and people are open and see you're not coming at them to find a way to undermine them, you're coming at them to help them and reduce and make everyone work more efficiently, they begin to kind of open up and share even more. So for me, I would find out, because we had regular cadence calls with each department, human resources and operations. And it was kind of like, bring me your problems. What's happening? How can we work together? And the communication and collaboration would let us know where we were off. And of course, we could always trace it back to the data to validate that, yes, something is amiss on one of our three of the triage pieces.
Nice. All right. Just one more question for me. How much do you share the data?
I'll share everything. I'm full transparency. Data is a tool for everyone. If I can get it, I'm going to share it because one, it's going to validate my point and numbers don't lie. And
Mhm.
two, it's going to help maybe give someone else insight to, man, I didn't even know this existed. I actually, in my last role, I asked for an admin pass to the data, to our analytics. I'm like, I want to go in and play and make my own reports. And they were like, we love you for that. Absolutely. So I am against gatekeeping. Share everything you have.
Very nice. All right. Well,
Yeah.
Christine, thank you so much. I almost feel as I was listening to your presentation, I'm like, hey, we could do an entire conference on this. There's so much information. This is like such good stuff. I mean, truly, I don't know, what the conference topic specifically would be, but you shared a lot of great information. This is going to be a really, really
Awesome.
valuable recording for folks. So thanks, Christine, once again, coming back and really contributing to this community and helping a lot of folks out with sharing your knowledge.